Okay, now that you understand what PIM is, let's talk about how to design it, and then I'll share with you some best practices. Now, a lot of the information I'm going to share with you is directly from the Microsoft documentation. I'll be sure to put a link in the video description for you as well. Okay, well, let's go ahead and jump into it. Just as a reminder, with PIM, the user has to submit for a request, and we call the request activate. So they actually click activate, and then they respond to an MFA challenge, and then they fill out an approval form, business justification, ticket number, how long they need access for, and then it gets sent to an approver. The approver approves it. The user then gets those elevated rights. Everything's logged in the audit log, and then the PIM admin, whoever that may be, can then run an access review later to see who still has admin rights, and they'll be able to take action from there. Now, the most important thing here I want to share with you is that PIM, it's not a just enough access solution. It's not a JIA solution. It's a JIT solution. It's a just-in-time solution. And it's really designed for taking care of two different types of admin roles. Azure Active Directory roles, so like global administrator, security administrator, so on. And then Azure resource roles. So admin roles in Azure like a user access admin or even a contributor or a custom role. So make sure you understand that when you're approaching your design. Now, you want to first also identify who's going to be approving requests. These are people that arguably have keys to the kingdom. So they need to be well vetted, they need to be trusted, understand what makes them to be eligible to approve requests. This is a big responsibility. It's a big deal. And then those approvers need to be either in the global administrator's role, the privileged administrator role, or a security administrator role. I usually recommend doing the privileged administrator role just because it's at least privilege. I don't have to give them global admin rights, but just keep that in mind. Now, I can also have an approver that can also be explicitly assigned to a role. So if I need somebody to approve just Teams administrator elevation requests and nothing else, then I could do that as well. So again, that's all part of my design and my considerations. Now, once I do that, I need to figure out what are the settings for each individual role. So when people want to elevate their rights, they have to basically fill out a form. And so in that form, I'm going to ask the user, well, how long do you need the rights for? And I could set a maximum duration. So I could say, look, you can only request rights for up to an hour, or up to 8 hours, or up to 24 hours, but I could put rails on it there. And that's where you can see there in that screenshot. Do I want to require justification that they have to type in? Then that gets logged in the audit log. Do I want to ask for ticket information, like a ticket number? Do I want to challenge it with multi-factor authentication to make sure they are who they say they are when they go to fill out this form? Do I want to add a unique approver, like I mentioned before? And then what kind of expiration considerations do I want to make here as well? So all things I want to factor into my design for each one of these roles. And that's probably really important to say as well that I want to make sure I understand which admin roles do I want to make available for users to be able to elevate to. Now, another part of this is each one of these roles has the ability to send email notifications. Email notifications to members that are made eligible for the role. So if I'm Matt in the help desk and I want to be eligible to be a Teams administrator, then I'm going to get an email letting me know as the assignee here. But then also the PIM admin and the approver will also get an email with the way this is checked. And then I can send a notification when members are assigned as active in the role. So once they get granted the admin rights, I can send those out and then send notifications when an eligible member tries to activate the role or submit the request. So I just want to make sure that I don't flood everybody with email notifications, but I want to take this into consideration. I may want to add a distribution list over here, and then I can always check the box for critical emails only to try to reduce the amount of noise. The other thing here is that the PIM admin will receive a weekly digest email of all the activities. You can see that here in the screenshot. And so that's useful, and this is all hyperlinked. So if you're a member of the privileged role administrator's role, security administrator's role, or global administrator's role, you will by default and automatically receive this weekly email. So just make sure you understand that. I need to figure out who my stakeholders are. This is really important because as you go to design this should not be designed in a vacuum. You need to be talking to the security team, the compliance team, the CIO, the CISO, all the different players out there, my sysadmins, and making sure that everybody is able to provide their input. And so I need to figure out who are the stakeholders, make sure I mark them as being needed to be informed or responsible, or they're the service owner. Think of like a RACI matrix, a responsible, accountable, consultant, and informed matrix for each one of these individuals. And so this is an example of what that might look like for Azure AD. And then I have another example here for what that might look like for Azure roles. So again, I just want to identify my stakeholders. Now I also want to plan for least privilege delegation. And so that means for Azure Active Directory roles, you want to make sure that you assign the least number of members to the global administrator role, but also you want to make sure that you assign them and make them eligible for less powerful roles. So if I need to take care of teams, it probably doesn't make sense to assign me as a global administrator. And so you just want to make sure you take that into consideration. Not everybody needs to be a global admin. Understand the granularity of the roles, right? And understand least privilege. And so making sure you go through all the available Azure Active Directory roles and understanding what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do, like being a Teams admin or a help desk admin or a password administrator, so on and so forth. Go out and develop a list, maybe it's an Excel spreadsheet of all the roles that are in your organization and who actually is a member of those different roles. And you could always use this Discovery and Insights tool, which I'll talk more about in the next video, to be able to reduce that exposure. For all global admins in the organization, find out why they need the role. If you need to be a global admin, please tell me why and submit a business justification. Let's make sure we understand that. Now, this is well documented. It's out there in the Microsoft documentation website, but Microsoft itself only has 10 global administrators. And this is a company that has, 150,000 employees. So if they can do it, you could probably do it too. So just make sure you minimize that and really consider low privileged roles. Okay, and then the other thing I want to talk about here is just automating as much of this as possible. And here's some screenshots of what the access review looks like to see who actually has access to what, and then Discovery and Insights. And I'll take you more through that in another video. All part of the planning and design here. Now, when you think about an Azure role, they have the concept of access reviews over there as well to be able to see who has current access and what role are they a member of. But you want to minimize the owner and user access administrator assignments. You want to minimize any kind of master role that provides too much privileges. So just things to think about here. And I have some other considerations if you want to pause the video and read those. Okay, I want you to understand and make a decision on which role assignments should be protected by PIM. So after you do this cleanup of all your privileged role assignments to figure out who was a member of what, and then maybe remove them and really clean it up, you then need to decide which roles you want to protect. Is it global admin? Is it Teams admin? Is it help desk admin? Who is it? And then if a role is protected by PIM, eligible users assigned to it must elevate to use the privileges granted by the role. So that means that they have to fill out a form, they have to go through a request, and you would want to consider them using MFA to make sure we validate they are who they say they are, and make sure they're actually providing a reason. And so when that approver gets the email, they can make sure that they take that into consideration. Now, choosing which roles to protect with PIM can also be difficult, and it's going to be different for everybody. So I can't tell you how to do this, but what I do want to tell you, though, is make it simple. Don't try to boil the ocean on day one. Start off simple and grow into it. Okay, so here's my top 10 list of Azure Active Directory roles that have the most permissions. You probably don't want to give anybody these roles outside a few select individuals or maybe a team of individuals. So just keep that in mind. But if you have to make these eligible for somebody to activate, then so be it. And then also make sure you understand the directory reader and some of these security reader and some of these other roles that have read-only access. Because if those accounts that are part of those roles compromised, then an attacker could be able to go in and read sensitive data, like read how are your configuration policies set up in MCAS, as an example, which could be really bad. Now, decide if you want to use a group to assign roles or if you just want to assign it manually to those users. And make sure you're keeping track of who's assigned to a role. Develop a spreadsheet, develop a little database, if you will. Track this, and then make sure you have a process around who gets added and who gets removed. Those are all good life cycle and hygiene maintenance here. The other thing is you want to delegate assigning the role. And so you might have a group owner that manages all the membership for that group. And then if we're talking about Azure AD here and assigning those, again, only the privileged role admin, global admin, or the security admin can manage that, or the group owner. So make sure you keep that in mind as well. So if you want to pause and review the rest of the slide, feel free to do so. Decide which role assignments should be permanent or eligible to be permanent. And so this is where I need to figure out, are there any users that just need to have these permanent roles assigned to them? Now, the other thing here is understand the frequency of elevation. Like if Matt at the help desk is asked every week to be a Teams admin, maybe we should consider making him a Teams admin, right? So let's understand that a little bit more. And then let's really understand the business justification. Don't tell me you need to be a global admin because you're on IT. We need to make sure we understand why you need to be an admin and then make sure we take that into account, right? Again, they have keys to the kingdom. This is a really serious topic. Now, you could set up access reviews so you get periodic reviews of people that have these role assignments, and then it does user self-attestation to be able to let them recertify every so often. And I'll talk more about that in another video. Now, think about your settings here for PIM, and I've been talking through some of these, and think about the different roles. You might require MFA for a couple of roles, but maybe not for others. Maybe you might want to require a ticketing number, maybe if it's a help desk admin, but maybe not a global admin. Who's going to approve it? How long are they good for? So on and so forth. Now, another important consideration here is communication plan, especially if you're in a large organization and you have a lot of administrators that could be impacted by this. Look, it's a big deal if everybody had some kind of high privileged role like global admin or domain admin, non-prim world, and you're taking all that away. So you want to make sure that you communicate the change. What is PIM? How is it going to benefit us? Who's going to be impacted? What's the timeline of this thing getting rolled out? What's in it for you? More security, minimize risk. It's protecting not only the organization, but it's also protecting those admins as well. And also help them understand, look, you might need to go out there and register for MFA. And then here's help desk articles. Here's official documentation the organization may have. Communicate this. Now, the most important part of communication is making sure it's coming from somebody that's in the chain of command. Ideally, it's going to come from some kind of an executive sponsor, i.e. the CIO, and then it's going to come, or CISO, and then it's going to come from the immediate supervisor of those admins to reinforce the message. Also, think about your training plan. So as part of that communication, you probably want to also let them know, hey, we got some training we're going to roll out. Videos, maybe in-person classes in the conference room, maybe some Teams meetings where we jump on video and we talk through it. How are you going to impact or train those impacted users and admins? How are you going to train the help desk and the support team? What does that look like? And then how are you going to train the approvers? So if you're responsible for approving these PIM requests, what's that process look like? What's the workflow look like? So on and so forth. You probably want to have that done before you roll this out. Now, before you roll it out, you're going to want to test it. And so make sure you identify a good group of people, maybe 3 to 5 people, that you can use to validate all your settings and basically run through it. A best practice I'll share with you, or just more of a recommended practice really, is develop a test plan and document this and come up with different scenarios. Maybe using my video here as an example, different scenarios, and go through and test those to make sure they work the way you want them to work. Email notifications. Make sure you understand what these email notifications look like and who they get sent to and the frequency of them and what's included in them. And then the other thing here is if you're in a larger organization, make the service owners of these different roles test users. So for example, if I'm the Exchange administrator, make me a test user so that I can give you feedback on this and also be a cheerleader or an advocate. So identify your test users, come up with a test plan. When it comes to operations, this is where we get into auditing and alerting. I want you to figure out with your organizations who's going to be responsible for monitoring the alert dashboard. So within PIM, and I'll do another video on this where I talk through alerting, here you can see the available alerts. Who's going to be responsible for looking at that? Who's going to be clicking on these alerts and drilling into them and resolving them and dismissing them? What's the process look like for that? Also, What kind of email notifications need to be sent? So I talked more about that in the beginning, but it's just something else to kind of rehash. And then the audit log. So who's going to be monitoring the audit log? Are you streaming it to Azure Log Analytics and creating alerts off of it? Are you creating alert notifications from the Office 365 audit log? How are they going to be monitored? So keep that in mind as well. And then how long are the audit logs going to be kept for? Also an important consideration. Access reviews. I'm going to do another video on this, but basically access reviews is a feature of Azure Active Directory where I can send out a notification to the admins and be able to ask them, do you still need access? And then they click on a button in the email and they go and fill out a form if they need access. And if they don't need access, then they can revoke their access. That's extremely helpful. I recommend doing this periodically, maybe once a quarter. And as you do this, establish a governance board to review and audit all the access through PIM on a quarterly basis, making sure that only the individuals that really need access can make access. If we have anybody else that's in these groups that don't need access, let's make sure we get them removed. And that requires some kind of a governance board. Again, I'll do a video on access reviews and dive deeper into that later on, probably in about 5 or 6 videos from now, once we get through with PIM. Okay, the last thing I want to wrap up with is APIs. There is a workflow to submit the request, and then as an approver, there is a workflow that you have to go through and approve it. Now, some Microsoft partners out there and some even of our enterprise customers have taken the APIs for PIM and they wrote their own app. I once met somebody that wrote an app on the mobile device to be able to request and approve PIM tasks. I met somebody that did it in a web page, whatever. It might be kind of cool if you could do this in Teams. So that's a challenge to all of you guys, or maybe a Power App, or maybe even a Power Automate. But take advantage of the APIs. If you've got some developer skills, this could be a game changer for PIM. Okay, so hopefully this was helpful, and now you got some ideas around considerations for designing PIM. There's really not much to it other than making sure you understand, is this going to be for Azure AD or Azure? Who's my approvers going to be? And then what are the individual settings for each of the roles that people can be eligible for? That's really it. There's not a whole lot to it. So now let's jump in and let's start looking at PIM.